The lights burned bright above the ring that night, cascading over two men whose paths had led them here through fire and sweat. From Mexico City stood Isaac Pitbull Cruz, a fighter molded in the narrow gyms of his homeland, known for his bulldog frame, unrelenting pressure, and a spirit that refused to retreat. Across the ring was Thomas Gunna Man Mattice from Cleveland, Ohio, a man who carried himself with poise and technical confidence. He was taller, longer, and saw himself as the smarter boxer, one who could outthink the brawler in front of him. But as the crowd roared and the bell neared, the atmosphere was electric. You could feel the tension like static in the air. Cruz, compact and still, glared across the canvas, his gloves twitching like a dog straining at the leash. Mattice shifted on his feet, ready to box, to stay disciplined, to prove that skill could outlast savagery. The referee's words, "Protect yourself at all times," barely faded before the first bell rang, and the Pitbull was unleashed. He charged forward instantly. No feeling out process, no hesitation. Every step he took closed the distance between them like a tightening vice. The sound of leather meeting flesh echoed as Cruz began to dig viciously to the body, making his intentions clear from the opening minute. There would be no peace, no space, no breath for Thomas Mattice. From the very first round, Mattice realized that fighting Isaac Cruz was like standing in the path of a storm. He could not stop it, only hope to weather it. Cruz came low, bobbing and weaving, slipping under jabs and ripping hooks to the ribs with alarming accuracy. Mattice's jab landed at times, flicking like a whip to slow Cruz's advance. But the Pitbull was undeterred. Every shot he absorbed only seemed to ignite him further. The crowd responded to every thud of Cruz's gloves, the sound of his punches a drumbeat of controlled aggression. Between rounds, Cruz's father barked instructions in Spanish, sharp, short commands that his son followed without hesitation. Mattice's corner tried to calm their fighter, reminding him to stay long, to keep the jab alive, to never trade in the pocket. But easier said than done. Every time Mattice tried to create distance, Cruz cupped the ring like a veteran, forcing him toward the ropes, ripping hooks to the body, and uppercuts through the guard. The American was fighting on instinct, and though he had moments of success with clean rights and quick counters, the relentless pressure of Cruz began to dictate the rhythm of the fight. By the third and fourth rounds, the intensity had risen to a fever pitch. Cruz, undeterred by the taller man's reach, began finding a home for his looping left hook and the occasional overhand right. Mattice was game, landing enough counters to earn respect, but he could not deter the storm. Midway through the third, a sharp right hand from Mattice snapped Cruz's head back, drawing a roar from the crowd, a sign of life from the man in blue. Yet, the answer was immediate and merciless. Cruz charged forward again, thudding a left to the body and a right upstairs, forcing Mattice back to the ropes, where he unleashed a barrage of short punches. The rhythm of the Pitbull's attack was mesmerizing. He didn't throw wildly, but with mechanical precision, each punch designed to break something down. As the bell sounded, Mattice took a long breath, his chest heaving, while Cruz stood unflinching, staring straight ahead as if he could already taste victory. The fourth round followed a similar pattern, Cruz cutting distance, Mattice circling, jabbing, surviving. The pace was brutal, and though Mattice showed skill, he was being drawn into Cruz's kind of fight, one fought not on the scorecards, but in the trenches. By the fifth and sixth rounds, fatigue began to show. Cruz's engine never faltered. His punches were shorter, his breathing steady, his body language relentless. Mattice, on the other hand, began to slow. He still had flashes, sharp jabs, clean rights, but Cruz was now fully in command. The Pitbull's left hooks to the ribs were beginning to sap the American's strength. Then came the moment of near disaster, a right hand over the top from Cruz that landed flush. snapping Matisse's head back and sending a wave of electricity through the crowd. Mattice stumbled, legs momentarily stiff, his back hitting the ropes. Cruz closed in, unleashing a flurry of punches that rattled through the guard. The bell rang, saving Mattice from a possible knockdown. The commentators' voices rose. Was he saved by the bell? In that moment, everyone saw what Cruz was capable of, a mixture of power, precision, and merciless pursuit. He walked back to his corner expressionless, the face of a man who knew his mission wasn't complete. Matisse's heart, though, refused to die. In the 7th and 8th rounds, he began to find rhythm again. Using his jab, he kept Cruz at bay for stretches, circling smartly, using his reach to frustrate the shorter fighter. It wasn't dominance, but it was survival with defiance. Cruz, however, was not one to fade. He continued his forward march, his gloves thudding into Matisse's body with mechanical consistency. The Mexican's composure was remarkable. Never rushing, never flailing. His eyes stayed locked, his pressure constant. Mattice landed a few beautiful right hands, even a crisp uppercut that drew gasps from the crowd. But Cruz absorbed them, shook them off, and pressed forward once more. It was like trying to hold back a tide with your bare hands. By now, the crowd was entirely invested, half cheering the grit of Mattice, half marveling at the relentlessness of Cruz. Every exchange was a test of will. Every second felt heavier than the last. Round 9 brought another brutal exchange. Both men dug deep, their faces showing the marks of battle. Cruz landed a left hook that staggered Mattice again, followed by a right hand to the body that sent him reeling into the ropes. Mattice fired back bravely, throwing wide overhands and uppercuts, but his punches lacked the snap they once had. Still, the American's courage drew admiration. He refused to back down, even as Cruz poured on the pressure. Sweat sprayed with every collision, the ring becoming an island of pure endurance. The fans roared as Cruz ripped another combination to the body and head, the rhythm of his assault unstoppable. Mattice survived the round on sheer willpower, but as he slumped on his stool, his corner's instructions were drowned out by the pounding of his own pulse. Across the ring, Cruz sat upright, eyes steady, unmoved. The Pitbull didn't chase knockouts, he forced them to come to him. When the 10th and final round began, exhaustion was visible on both men. The crowd stood, sensing they were witnessing two fighters who had poured everything into 10 relentless rounds of attrition. Mattice, fueled by pride, came out swinging, landing clean jabs and a right cross that briefly halted Cruz's advance. For a moment, it looked like he might steal the round, maybe even the fight. But Cruz, drawing on the reserves that only the great pressure fighters possess, stepped forward once more, cutting off the ring, forcing exchanges in the corners. His punches were shorter now, but every one still carried weight. Mattice tried to move, to box, but there was nowhere left to run. Cruz finished strong. Hooks to the body, rights to the head, and a final surge of punches as the bell rang. The two men, drenched in sweat and respect, touched gloves and nodded, mutual recognition of shared war. As the fighters waited for the decision, the tension hung thick. The crowd murmured, judges tallied, and both corners leaned on the ropes in silent prayer. Then, the ring announcer raised the microphone, his voice echoing through the arena. After 10 rounds of boxing, we go to the judges' scorecards, both in favor of your winner, by majority decision, Isaac Pitbull Cruz. The crowd erupted. Cruz raised his arms high, emotionless yet triumphant, while his father embraced him in the corner. Mattice nodded in quiet respect, beaten, but not broken. This wasn't just a fight. It was a portrait of styles colliding, of will tested to its limit. For Cruz, it was another step toward greatness. A night where his relentless pace and Mexican spirit prevailed. For Mattice, it was proof of his heart and skill, surviving the Pitbull storm when many would have fallen. Under the lights that night, both men left the ring changed, one victorious, one scarred. but both carved into the story of boxing's eternal struggle between pressure and pride. As the crowd continued to roar in the aftermath, Isaac Cruz stood in the center of the ring, his gloves raised high above his head, the sweat on his face glistening under the blinding lights. Around him, the chants of Pitbull, Pitbull filled the air like an anthem. For him, this was not just another win. It was proof of identity, of heritage, of everything that made him who he was. Born and bred in the unforgiving gyms of Mexico City, Cruz had learned early that pressure was not a style, but a survival instinct. His performance against Mattice had been the embodiment of that philosophy, a relentless pursuit that never allowed space, never permitted comfort. Across the ring, Mattice, bruised and battered, stood tall in defeat. There was no shame in his eyes, only the quiet pride of a man who had faced a hurricane and stayed on his feet. He had boxed beautifully at moments, countered with precision, and shown courage that could not be questioned. But on this night, courage was not enough. The relentless rhythm of the Pitbull had drowned him, one body shot at a time. Reporters called it a clash of styles. Purists called it a lesson in pressure. But to those who watched, it was something more primal, a test of endurance, a demonstration of what happens when unbreakable will meets immovable resolve. Long after the cameras shut off and the crowd began to fade, the echoes of that battle lingered in the arena like ghosts of war. Isaac Cruz walked out of the tunnel with his father beside him, their faces calm, their mission accomplished. Somewhere down the corridor, Mattice sat with ice pressed to his ribs, a towel draped over his shoulders, thinking not of loss, but of lessons. Both men had shared something few could understand, the intimacy of violence, the respect that only warriors know. The night had proven once again why boxing remains the purest form of competition. No team, no clock, no excuses. Just one man against another, will against will. And on this night, Isaac Pitbull Cruz had shown the world why his name carries weight far beyond Mexico's borders. He had not merely won a fight. He had announced himself as a force of nature, the kind of fighter who doesn't just beat opponents, he breaks their rhythm, their confidence, and their peace. In the end, when the lights dimmed and silence returned, what remained was simple and unforgettable, the sound of Isaac Cruz's footsteps still moving forward,